All right. So today we're going to be talking about, well, Apuleius and the cult of Isis and Osiris within the context of the novel known as The Golden Ass. Now, a lot of people are wondering just what this topic is about. What are we going to cover? I mean, what could we cover? Now, in a previous lecture, we talked about the cult of Isis, and we went in depth about it. But we focused so much upon Isis within the context of ancient Egypt. And if you remember that previous lecture, we got all the way to the Ptolemies. But we have to understand that the cult of Isis changes quite a bit during the Greco Roman period. It does. It deserves its own lecture because there are so many new additions and new ways of looking at it that it deserves a talk in its own right. And so this is what this talk is about. Now, of course, the person who gives so much in the way of details of the cult of Isis happens to be, Apuleius, and of course, it happens to be within his work known as the Golden Ass, this novel. So he gives a lot of information. It doesn't mean that's all we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be talking about all different kinds of topics as related to the cult of Isis during the Greco-Roman period, during the time of the Greeks and Romans, mostly the Romans. And we have to understand that there's some new phenomena going on here that are going to make us reread the cult of Isis. One of them, of course, will be understanding what is known as mystery religions, sometimes called mystery cults. So this trend becomes popular right after the time of Alexander the Great. And so this form of religion incorporates itself and mixes with the cult of Isis. And then also another movement that mixes in is philosophy. Specifically in this context, the philosophy of Middle Platonism. And it turns out that Apuleius and Plutarch before him, who he does use his writings most likely, are both Middle Platonists. They're not early Platonists, they're not Neo-Platonists, they're Middle Platonists. And so these ideas converge together along with other aspects of popular culture during the Roman Empire and transforms the cult of Isis, something that's so different. And yet, I want to make sure that you know that we are going to go into so many details that you can almost visualize a belief system. Okay, so here we go. Apuleius, his life, he was born around 124 CE, died around 170. He didn't live that long, right? As I said, he's the author of the Golden Ass, also known as the Metamorphosis, right? He arrived from a prominent family, and in fact, his father was a provincial magistrate, but his father died and left him and his brother with 2 million sesterces, which of course made him really rich and financially independent. In fact, it enabled him to focus more upon his education. So isn't it great? I mean, he can now not worry about working. He gained a fortune as a result of his inheritance, he and his brother. And the thing that he wants to do most of all is get an education. And so he goes off to Carthage, gets an education there. Next, he goes off to Athens. At Athens, he studies Platonism, well, specifically Middle Platonism. And then Apuleius continues on to Rome, where he studies Latin rhetoric and Roman law. And finally, he returns to Carthage again. So he was extremely interested in religion as well as philosophy, and he was initiated into many mystery cults, quite a few, including the cult of Dionysus and a cult related to Asclepius. In fact, the cult in relation to Asclepius, he actually becomes a priest within it. So it is fair to say that Apuleius knows mystery religions really well because he is definitely directly a part of it. And he also becomes the provincial priest of the province of Carthage. So there you have that. Okay, but education costs a lot of money, even then. And so when he returns, basically to Carthage, he spent it all on education. Apuleius then decides to. This is where it gets colorful. You're thinking, okay, this is your typical, biography. We've heard this before. Now it's going to change. Guy's broke. He's got no money. So what is he going to do, right? So he decides he's going to go to Alexandria, and but he becomes sick, and he stops at a place at Tripoli, and he is graciously received by his friend by the name of Sisinnius Pontianus. Pontianus, he was an old friend that he met back in Athens. They studied together. They studied Platonism together. But now his friend has a mom. The mom is known as um, uh, uh, Pudentia, and she takes an interest in Apuleius. Yeah, and he takes an interest back. She's also extremely wealthy. She's a widow, and she was interested in marrying Apuleius. Now Apuleius is broke, so he's thinking this is going to work out, right? So they get married. Well, what happens is that his friend then gets married in turn, and he gets a little bit nervous because he knows that if mom dies, Apuleius is going to get all the money, and he's not going to get any. And so they try to come up with an idea to get rid of Apuleius, to force him to go away, to force him to get a divorce. And so the story even turns further. They accuse Apuleius of practicing magic, of using magic and charms to entice his mom to fall in love with him, and so she didn't really like him. But Apuleius, he did his magic and caused her to just fall head over heels in love. And so that's what happened. And so he takes this to the court of law. So actually to Claudius Maximus, the proconsul of Asia, and made this ridiculous accusation. We still have, an extent, the defense made by Apuleius, known as the Apologia, to the court for this claim. So when we talk about magic within the context of the Golden Ass, and the idea, got to remember that Apuleius was accused of doing this wicked magic, which of course he says in his speech that he did not do whatsoever. Okay, so Apuleius then he gained the mom did pass on. He did get the money, and he was very active in public life when he returned back home to Carthage. In fact, he was in charge of exhibiting gladiatorial shows of wild beasts in the province, and he endowed many things. And well, he lived happily ever after. And then he wrote this novel. So, but he did see himself as a philosopher. Now, I thought that was very important to understand his context, right? You kind of know about him a little bit more than you expected. But his philosophy does kind of go a little bit into the work as well. So he wrote a work on Plato and his doctrine, and also another work on the god of Socrates, right? And in fact, he's the one who made the famous quote, "Familiarity breeds contempt." Have you ever heard that saying? That's Apuleius. Now, Now, what he did is he opens up his work and he says that Plato has made a triple division of all nature, and especially of that part of which it comprises animated beings. And he is of the opinion that there are gods of the highest, the middle, and the lowest station, right? And so he talks about a division of the gods. So he believes that there are the high gods way up here, but there are the lower gods, and he believes the sun and the planets are also gods. But he understands these higher gods as invisible deities, right? And in fact, he writes, there is another species of gods which nature has denied to our sight, and still we may contemplate them with admiration through our intellect. In the number of these are those of the 12 gods, who are included, for example, Juno, Vesta, Minerva, Ceres, Diana, Venus, Mars, Mercury, uh, uh, Jupiter, Neptune, Vulcan, Apollo, and others of the like. So he talks about that, and he says that that so many people have to realize is that these gods are spiritual in nature, and they're very far removed from us, very far removed from us. And then beyond these high celestial gods, there is that which is known as the monad or the one. So he believes that there is the oneness, the monad, and then it becomes these high celestial gods, right? And but he says that we are not very well equipped because of our nature to understand them. Now, and so what is our nature? Again, when we talk about the golden mass, the work is about human nature. How does he see human nature? You know, when I first read this years ago, I had to laugh because um, human nature is not quite um, it's not quite what you would expect. It doesn't seem to have a lot of confidence in us. Apparently, he says about us. Now, think to yourself. He's describing us. He says, men, therefore, dwell on the earth, possessing the gift of speech, having immortal souls. That's what he believes, that's what he says, but mortal members, with frivolous and anxious minds. And we do have frivolous and anxious minds, do we not? With bodies brutish and infirm, of dissimilar manners, but similar errors, of presumptuous audacity, long lived hope, laboring in vain with variable fortunes, severely mortal, described as severely mortal, but taken all together in their whole species, eternal, quitting the scene in regular succession. I like that. We're quitting the scene in regular succession. It means we're dying. And leaving offspring to supply their place. Fleeting in their time, tardy at gaining wisdom. Wow, some of us, this seems like forever. We just finally figure things out and it's over. And he's all speedy in meeting with death and dissatisfied in life. You know, and I'm reading this, and you're thinking, yeah, this is from his philosophical work. This is the impression I get of how he views humanity when I read his novel. It's a perfect description. It works. But you know, he believes also there are some that do gain knowledge of the higher realms. But he says that we have a poverty of human speech to be able to fully express it, so that we are limited. So he says, okay, so we have these higher gods up there. What's in between? He calls them daemons. These are the ones that are of the middle nature. These are the ones who he says who carry our prayers and bounties, supplications and assistance, being a kind of interpreter. message carriers for both. And so they have these daemons in between, and of course, then us. So you have the super spiritual, pure spiritual realm above. You have this realm of these daemons, and these daemons are spiritual, but they're also material. They're kind of this realm in between, and then you have us. Uh, and so that's what he believes. And he says that sometimes we are so tempted to follow our flesh, and he kind of follows Plutarch on this, where he believes that the flesh is it weighs us down. Oftentimes, it's wicked. It brings us to our most base appetites, and then he goes, but says the spirit, of course, lifts us up, but not all of us. So this is kind of his idea. So the question is um, some people don't know: is he a philosopher or is he a novelist? There's a great quote by Richard Fletcher says that this division pressurizes Apuleius' identity. As an author, it is clear that there are two approaches that seek to understand him as either a novelist who dabbled in Platonism or as a Platonist who tried his hand at novel writing. Okay, so there you have it. So that's kind of his philosophy, and that's his ideas. So some of these concepts will also go into his work, and he'll view it that way. Okay, so let's move on to the topic at hand. Of course, we've been talking about it for a little while, and that is. I do want to mention one more thing. Um, Isis, within this connection, Isis is known within the Greek and Roman context is the goddess of knowledge and understanding. And so she becomes a prime candidate because of this idea of knowledge to the mystery religions emerging at this time. So the Greeks sometimes uh, view her in many different contexts. Sometimes they see her as the daughter of Hermes or Mercury, right? Sometimes they see her as connected to other gods or offspring from that. But they do also, within a Platonic perspective, they connect her in many cases with the realm of the spiritual cosmic soul. So the realm that's connected to this world, to the womb of the world, and Isis is connected within that context. And then they sometimes will put Osiris as like this logos, this messenger that acts in between Isis and then the great monad above. So you got the oneness above, you got Osiris, who's almost like a logos kind of character emanating from the one, and then being received by Isis. So you have this tripartite division there, and that Osiris will connect to the male gods, and as you find out from Apple, as we find out from as we find out from um, Apuleius, Isis is connected to the other goddesses. So you have this connection. Okay, moving right along. Okay, so Plutarch states who that Isis discloses the divine mysteries to those who are truly and justly, and have the names bearer of the sacred vessels and wearers of the sacred robes. These are they who within their souls, as though within a casket, bear the sacred writings about the God, clear of all superstition. So the idea is that they emphasize the idea that this belief system is not about being superstitious. Okay, a few moments on the mystery religions, mystery cults, because this is another feed into it. Mystery cults, as I said before, come about during the time of Alexander the Great. Uh, Maybe even before that time, but really become popularized during that period of time. And they're known for certain features. What happens basically is that uh, the Greeks and others spread to areas that are uh, beyond their knowledge, in many cases, beyond their cultures, and beyond their city states. It's a very uncertain kind of situation, right? Because if you're born in Corinth, you worship Aphrodite, or if you're born in Athens, you worship Athena, Ephesus, Artemis, and so forth. But you're just kind of born into a religion. Well, now you're just kind of thrown out of this context. The other thing is that many of these are going to marry people who are of other different belief systems. I remember Alexander the Great forcing, or actually asking his troops to take Persian wives, and there was a great celebration. And so you have so what will happen is that the question becomes, well, what is truth? What is it that we want? What is what we're seeking? And so there's going to be this hybrid kind of belief system where mystery cults, number one, are in a sense, they are exotic in character. So they're not Greek or Roman in appearance, but still Greek and Roman in reality. And this again will connect to the cult of Isis. What do I mean by that? Basically, it's this. It's like, hey, you know what? To attract people to a certain belief system, you got to make it look exotic and exciting, right? So look at the mystery cults, right? You're going to have, you're attracted to the cult of Kybele, the great mother goddess of Anatolia. Ooh, that's exotic. And yet, when you look into it, there's a lot of Greek and Roman ideas that are centered to it, but it looks exotic from the outside. Or what about the Persian cult of Mithras, right? Again, the same kind of thing that's going on, right? Uh, what about the there's of course the Paraborium of the Kybele cult, right? So we thought of that one. What about the cult of Isis, right? Hey, it's Egyptian in outer trappings, but its heart starts to be Greek in many ways, right? So they're exotic in the exterior, but still have some relevance to Greek and Roman rituals. They are spiritual in nature, so they focus upon the soul. They focus upon our soul and where it goes, and by our actions, we determine where it goes. So the soul can transform, right? Number three, these mystery cults focus upon salvation. The person can be saved from immediate harm in this life and will be given a happy afterlife. So it's about salvation. So far, by the way, the cult of Isis fits all of these, right? Next, of course, the number four, the mystery cults are about have mystery initiations. And we'll be talking about mystery initiations in a little bit. I like to call it status dramatization, right? So that through a transformative process, the person changes one's station in life. One changes one's fate. One, in a sense, is able to fate, defeat fate, right? And and have a new destiny. And so the cult of Isis will have this. And there's different kinds of initiations. Like for example, the Kibbe cult of the Parabolium. They put you in a pit and they cover it over with some grating, and then they sacrifice a bull on top of it, and the blood pours down upon you. And hey, you're good for another good for 7 years. So you have that. You have the almost like the zodiac hopscotch for the Mithras belief system as you go through these initiations. In the Eleusinian mysteries, you're going to have a situation where they're going to have a baptism with a pig, and your evil goes on to the pig. So there's like this transformation going on there. Most of these initiations have a sacred meal. The cult of Isis has this too. It has a sacred baptism. It has meals. So yes, it's also a personal religion. So you make an individual choice. I can't emphasize this enough. You in the past, you're just kind of born into your religion. Now you make a personal choice, a decision to choose your God to worship for salvation. Sounds like in many ways Christianity, and yet this is 300 years before Christianity. These ideas are forming, and they continue, of course, afterwards too. Right? They also are about votive offerings and vows that you offer something up in order to get something back. Like votive candles, you light this candle because you want to have a safe journey, and you light another one when you get to the other side. Which these ideas go into Catholicism, and they're all systems of faith, a belief that connect to faith. They're all about faith religions. Well, you have to believe in it. You believe in it by faith, and you are saved according to this. In fact, I'll be reading these lines right from Apuleius. He'll be saying exactly that. So you have this idea of salvation, of faith. You have these initiations. You have the soul's important. Wow, that really does have a lot of parallels in the way of Christianity. When it comes to the rites of these mystery cults, including the cult of Isis, they usually include things enacted, duromena, right? Things said, logomena, right? Things said, things shown, right? Dikemena, right? Things shown. So you have things that are enacted, drama acted out, things that are said, certain words, and finally, things that are revealed. So this is basically the mystery religions. Okay, now we're going to go and talk about the novel. So the Golden Ass. Okay, so what happens basically is that Apuleius he kind of he journeys to Thessaly on business, and on his way, he's listening to his companions talk. One tells a story about a sword swallower, uh, and was thinking to himself, and his companion was thinking, uh, I can't even take a whole mouthful of cheese, let alone swallow an entire sword. And so they talked about that on their way, and they're on their way. Actually, the one guy's on the way to the cheese market. Uh, but he's told by this gentleman by the name of Aristomenes, his traveling companion. He says, "Beware of a woman with magic powers, lest your intemperate speech do you mischief." He then speaks of a particular innkeeper that he met, describing her as a witch or enchantress, who he says whose divine powers are able to lower the sky, to halt the globe, to make fountains stone, and to melt mountains, even to raise the ghosts and summon the gods, extinguish the stars, and illuminate Tartarus itself. Well, that's kind of a lot of powers, right? So this person's enchantress has this ability to just change everything in a cosmological sense. Which, by the way, as you well know, Apuleius, having heard his philosophy, doesn't believe. Okay, so it's not okay. And it's interesting because we look at the word that he uses that our translators will use as witch or enchantress. And the word is for a while, he used the word lame, as lame. Wait. So basically, these are like mortal women that turn into demons, and are enchantress in the sense in a succubus kind of sense. So not quite any definition that we use, which it's not really that, because this is somebody who's using negative magic, and there's a demon in them. So that's different. So those who are doing good magic, he's not talking about that. Why? Because he himself is interested in aspects of good magic, the author himself, as opposed to a character. So even though he got accused of the bad magic, he didn't view it that way. Now that you know his history, we're going to have him get in trouble here. Okay, he also said that she can make all men fall for her, and not just locals, but people from India and Ethiopia. All right. He mentioned that one of the lovers that she turned into a beaver, right, and bit off his own testicles, and another he turned into a frog, right? You know, um, another one, she was jealous of this lady, and so she sealed up this lady's womb, and she was pregnant, and she's still carrying the baby, and it was now the size of an elephant. Obviously, this is ridiculous. Yeah, no, this is not going to happen. But this is his way of writing. Anyway, so the narrator believes the tale, and he wants to learn more about magic. He's curious. Curiosity really does kill the cat. And I have to say that he does make an ass of himself. Get it? Okay. So he does. Okay, sorry. Um, so he arrives in Thessaly, and no, and he goes to a place called Hypatha, and he stays with a certain Milo, who's a family friend, kind of a miser, and his wife Pamphile. Pamphile also he stays with Photis, who's Milo's servant. Now, Pamphile is considered a witch or an enchantress or one of these lamii, right? In fact, what happens is that he goes into town the next day. He meets his aunt, and she warns him that Milo's wife is an evil enchantress and will kill Lucius. You know, he'll kill him. But in fact, he does all kinds of interesting magic, according to his aunt. He says they call her first amongst enchantresses, mistress of every kind of fatal charm, who by breathing on twigs and pebbles and such like can drown all the light of the starlit globe in the depths of Tartarus and plunge the whole world into primal chaos. Okay, so she's considered kind of powerful. No sooner does she spy a handsome young man than, captivated by his looks, she directs her gaze and all her desire toward him. She sows the seeds of seduction, invades his mind, and fetters him with the eternal shackles of raging passion. He's always in heat, she says. Okay, so you get the idea. So he's been warned. Of course, Lucius now is going, hey, this is great. She must know a lot about magic, and I want to learn more myself. So, then we have a love scene because I told you the servant girl her name is Photis, and I got to tell you, this love scene has almost a contemporary vibe. It almost seems. I'll read it to you because I want to show you just a little bit of how a semi-erotic novel is written. So just so hold tight here. Here we go. Okay. Uh, so he makes love to the girl Photis. Here he says she was preparing diced innards for stuffing, minced meat, soup, and what I'd already divined with my nostrils, a wonderfully tasty sausage. She was neatly dressed in a linen tunic, gathered in with a bright red band beneath her breasts, rotating the cooking pot in her flower-like fingers, stirring it with a circular motion, at the same time flexing her body smoothly, her hips suddenly wiggling, her supple spine gently shaking, rippling delicately. I was transfixed by the sight, completely stunned. I simply stood, and so did that which a moment before had been limply asleep. At last I spoke. How beautifully, how delightfully, my dear Photis, your hips rotate that little pot. What a lovely treat you're about. happy and blessed for sure, that man whom you'd allow a dip of his little finger. With a ready and witty tongue, she replied, away with you, my lad, keep far away from the heat. If the tiniest flame should touch you even lightly, you'll be badly burned, and no one but me would be able to quench the blaze. I who season things sweetly and know how to make a stew or a bed to please. End quote. And so he's really this is a Platonist philosopher writing this. So so he's really engrossed in the materials. Um, yeah, okay, so there you have it. So he's formed this relationship with their servant Totus, as you can see. The next day, because the story is a whole series of different kinds of stories, so it's very entertaining at time. The next day, he goes to his aunt's home for dinner. I don't know why he just doesn't stay there, but he does, and he hears another story that I will just say mention. I'll just mention. There's a guest by the name Thelophoron, who tells this kind of ghastly story. And basically, what happens is he arrives one day at a place called Larissa, and he's short on funds. So they call out. There's somebody who's calling out saying, "Hey, we need you. We need anybody to guard this dead body overnight. We need somebody to guard this dead body overnight." The thing is, you have to stay awake. You can't fall asleep. Just keep your eyes open, because it's been known in this area that those who are enchantresses, evil enchantresses, what they will do is that they will get the corpses and they'll cut off parts of the body to use in their magic, like they'll cut off their noses and ears. And this guy needs money. He says, I'll do it. Okay, good job. So he does it. He guards overnight. And of course, his eyes grow heavy, real heavy. And and then he wakes up and he looks at the corpse. It's fully preserved. Oh, good. What a relief. Nothing happened. And the family comes out and thanks him, and they're ready for burial. It looked like it's going to be a great situation. And then suddenly an Egyptian seer shows up and says, no, that's not what happened. He fell asleep. And there he's all acting like, I didn't fall asleep. Look, the corpse is untouched. So, yeah, but you know what? The corpse has the same name as you. And so when the witches called the corpse, you had fallen asleep and you responded, and they took you in and they cut off your nose and they cut off your ears. And they're all, look, I have my nose and I have my ears. Yes, they put clay ones to replace it. And all of a sudden, he reaches his ears and they come off. They're clay and his nose goes off. He's like, no, I'm deformed. Yeah. And so and then he grew his hair really long, and and he put a fake nose on. And that was revealed. These are the kinds of interesting stories, right? So meanwhile, Milo's wife, the enchantress, she's able to turn herself into a bird. He is curious. So he finds out from the servant, the one that he was making love with, he finds out that she says, or she claims that she has the secret. So Photis gets the remedy, and he rubs it over him because he thinks he's going to turn himself into a bird and fly away, and then of course come back again. So he threw off his clothes, right? He says, I plunged my hand eagerly, large dollops, and smeared my body all over. And he's actually said he started flapping his arms up and down. And all of a sudden, my soft skin hardened to a hide. My fingers and toes merged with hands and feet, squeezed together into individual hooves. And a long tail shot from the tip of my spine. Now my face was enormous, my mouth immense, my nostrils gaped, and my lips hung down. My ears, too, were ludicrously long and hairy. The only consolation I found in my wretched transformation was that though I could no longer embrace Photis, at least my member had grown. Okay, so something's on his mind. Anyway, so now he's definitely made an ass of himself. And so, unfortunately, Milo is now sorry. Long story short, is that Lucius, he's an ass, and thieves take him from the house, and he suddenly has all of these adventures and misadventures. And we have tons of stories that we're not going to say, but there's lots of stories about ghosts and spirits and all kinds of things. The tale of the wife's tub is kind of interesting, right? Here's the story where she's making love to this guy. Of course, the husband comes home pretty fast, unexpectedly, and so the lover hides in the tub, and the husband says, I'm going to sell that tub, an old tub, for 6 drachma, and she says, well, I've already sold the tub for 7 drachma, and in fact, the guy who bought it is inspecting inside. Of course, they lift it up, and there's the lover, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm here to buy it." Oh, okay, so these are the kinds of stories that we hear. The murdered miller, interesting stuff, and he has all of these adventures and misadventures. And finally, though, he's he realizes he was told that one of the remedies would be a red rose at one point, but he doesn't seem to get the context right. Now we enter in to the story of the of Isis entering into the situation. So what happens is that he realizes he goes to Corinth, and then he goes out to the port there, Century, right? He goes out there, and and he is tormented by fate. And so he decides that I need to purify myself. So because I've been doing all these kinds of things, he's been having some interesting misadventures, and I need to purify myself. And so what he does is he puts himself and he goes as an ass 7 consecutive immersions in the sea. So he throws himself in the water and he ducks himself 7 times. He offers a prayer to the Queen of Heaven, and he asks her to help him out. And all of a sudden, you know, something happened. In fact, he said, then my face was wet with tears. I prayed to the great goddess, Queen of Heaven, whether you are known as bountiful Ceres, the primal harvest mother, who delighted at finding your daughter, Proserpine, again, abolished our primitive woodland diet, showed us sweet nourishment, and now dwell at Eleusis, which, by the way, is connected to Eleusinian mysteries, right? Or heavenly Venus, who at the founding of the world joined the sexes by creating love, propagating the human race in endless generation, or worship now as a sea-girt sanctuary of Paphos, or Diana, Apollo's sister, you who relieve the pangs of countless childbirths with your soothing remedies, venerated now at Ephesus, or dread Proserpine herself, she of the night cries, who triple face combats the assault of spirits, shutting them from earth above, who wanders the many sacred groves, perpetuated by a host of rites, O light of women, illuminate every city, nourishing the glad seed with your misty radiance, shedding that light whose power varies with the passage of the sun in whatever aspect, by whatever name, with whatever ceremony we should invoke you. And he goes on, he says, rid me of this foul, four-footed form, restore me to the sight of my own people. Okay, so what happens? Well, what happens is he sees an apparition. Or actually sees an apparition, he sees goddess, So, and here we have a great description. He says, I had scarcely closed my eyes when a divine apparition appeared, rising from the depths of the sea, her face worthy to be adored by the gods themselves. Slowly she rose till her whole body was in view, shaking herself free of the brine to stand before me, a radiant vision. If the poverty of human speech allows me, if the goddess herself grants me a wealth of verbal inspiration, I shall try to describe her marvelous beauty to you. So he is now having seen the goddess that he had called upon after he had immersed himself 7 times. He says, firstly, her long, thick hair in tapering ringlets was loosely spread over her divine neck and shoulders, and her head was crowned with a complex garland of interwoven flowers of every kind. At the center, over her brow, a flat disc like a mirror, or rather a moon symbol shone with brilliant light. Coiled vipers reared from the right and left her of her coronet that was bristling with erect ears of corn. Her multicolored robe was of the finest linen, gleaming here pure white, here a saffron yellow, there flaming red rose, with a woven border flowing with flowers and fruit. And what dazzled me the most of all was her jet black cloak, with its full sheen wrapped gleaming about her, slung from her left shoulder, knotted at the breast, and sweeping over her right hip. It hung in sweetly, uh, in complex folds down to a tassel fringe. Along its border and over its surface fell a scatter of glittering stars around a full moon center, breathing fiery rays. And she bore a host of emblems. I mean, this is a pretty dazzling sight. But she is connected here also with the stars, right? Um, in her right hand, she held a sistrum, right? Which is obviously, this is a strip of bronze curved in a loop with small rods across its width, right? And of course, now the word sistrum, um, that's it's Latin. It derives from the Greek term for the Egyptian rattle, sistron, which means to be shaken. But I like the Egyptian term. The Egyptian term for sistrum basically is a word that sounds like what it represents. The word is shishishit, shishishit, and of course shishishit, 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 shishishit. So the word sounds like, you know, how it sounds like when you are um, shaking the sistrum. I find that fascinating. By the way, the other word is sekum, which means power, like as in sekhmet. So just kind of throw that one in for fun, right? From her left hand, a boat-shaped vessel of gold and asp, and of course, she makes her own declaration. In her declaration, she says that she here it is. So I, mother of all nature and mistress of the elements, firstborn of the ages and greatest of power divine, queen of the dead and queen of the immortals, all gods and goddesses in a single form, who with a gesture commands heaven's glittery summit, the wholesome ocean breezes, the underworld's mournful silence, whose sole divinity is worshipped in differing forms with varying rites under many names by all the world. There at Pessinus, the Phrygian firstborn of men call me Cybele, mother of the gods. In Attica, a people sprung from their own soil, name me Cecropian Minerva. In sea-girt Cyprus, I am Paphian Venus. Dicnane Diana to the Cretan archers, Stygian Proserpine, right, to the three-tongued Cilicians, Adeleusis, ancient Ceres, Juno to some, to others, Bellona, Hecate, Rhamnusia, and the race of the Ethiopians, first to be lit down by the risen sun's divine rays, and the Egyptians too, keep an arcane lore, worship me with my own rites, and they call me by my true name, Royal Isis. I am here in pity for your misfortunes. I am here as your helper and your friend. And so she reveals herself as simply Isis, right? She is, her true name is Isis. No, it's interesting here, of course. This is the Greek word, right? Right. I know that in Egyptian you can have Aset or Eset for her name, but the Greeks called her Isis because it has it. In many cases, they'll say it connects to the word oida, which means knowledge. And Isis was connected with knowledge, special knowledge within a Greek context. So that's why it's important. The name itself before could connect to the idea of being throned. The question is, does it mean throne mother? Or does it mean that she is the mother, the throne, the throne that gives, that is connected to Pharaoh? There's lots of controversies that are over that. Okay, so here we go. Now we're on to the mystery cult aspect. So right away, we're getting there. Here we go. It says, so she wants to cure him. But she says, remember one thing clearly, though, and keep it locked deep within your heart. The life that is left to you to the final sigh of your last breath is pledged to me. It is right that all your days be devoted to she who graces returns you to the world of men. Under my wing, she says, you will live in happiness and in honor. And when your span of life is complete and you descend to the shades, even there, in the sphere beneath the earth, you will see me, who am now before you, gleaming amidst the darkness of Archaron, queen of the Stygian depths, and dwelling yourself in the Elysian fields. You will endlessly adore me, and I will favor you. Wow. So here we go. So mystery cults or religions, the idea is, you believe in me, you gain salvation. It's pretty obvious here. Real obvious here, the promise. But look, it's also has a promise of happiness. Now, this is a joyful thing, a happy life here on earth. If you pledge, you make a promise to me, right? Okay, so what will happen is that soon the revelation ended, and of course soon the dark shades of night were dispelled. A golden sun arose, and at once a crowd of triumphant believers thronged the streets. And not only was I in my secret joy, but the whole world seemed filled with such happiness that the creatures, the skies, the very houses themselves seemed to radiate joy from their shining faces. So what's going up here? Wait, and I'll read one more bit. It says, so the holy revelation ended, and the invisible goddess withdrew into her own being. Instantly, I was freed from sleep and leapt up, bathed in sweat with feelings of fear and joy, filled with utter amazement at this clear manifestation of the great goddess's presence. I splashed myself with seawater, reviewing intently her series of potent commands. So what is going on here is that he accepted this pledge to follow her. If and of course the idea is that how is she going to cure him? Well, she said that there will be a priest in the procession dedicated to her that will have a rose, and she will communicate through a dream to that priest that he is to look for this ass, and when he takes that rose, he will be restored. Okay, there it is. So, but you pledge yourself to me. This is the agreement. You guys got it? This is the pledge. So we're looking at something that's fascinating, looking into this, and you realize, wait, you never usually hear about this, that within Greco-Roman religions, you have this idea of what you accept this particular goddess, you pledge to this goddess, and this goddess is going to give you eternal life and happiness and bliss, and this person's feeling joy, and it's like, wow, this is a full conversion experience, right? Very okay. So, what is this procession, right? What is it? No, it is known as the Isis Navigatum, right? The Isis Navigatum is held on around March 5th. It's an annual festival. In fact, the celebration of this lasted for a very long time. all the way to around 416 CE. So, and Isis here is understood as this goddess to calm the sea, to make it favorable. So it is the end of the winter season because nobody wants to go sailing during the winter, right? It's just too turbulent. But now it's the opening of the sailing season, which is the opening for chances of trade and opportunity. And so many people who are followers of Isis, what they would do is have a procession from the Isis temple to the sea, this great procession with all kinds of things going on. And then, of course, fill a boat or boats with various gifts and offerings, and then float it out into the waters. So the Isis will give favorable winds and of course the wonderful currents for the sailing season. So that's kind of the idea of it. Uh, Processions, of course, this is where, of course, Apuleius is going to run into this priest to change him. So, okay, so now we're going to go into some details of this procession. So the first part, you're actually going to hear details, and it's not just from Apuleius. I'll read Apuleius. I actually have other sources. For example, I have Philokalus, who wrote around 345 CE. I have his work as well. So what I'm going to be doing is I'll be talking about this procession in detail, but only using lots of sources, kind of putting it together so you can visualize what this navigative was like. Okay, so the first part, Apuleius calls it the crowd pleasers. It's it's comedy, it's buffoonery, it's something to make people laugh. In the ancient world, laughter could also be sacred. Yeah, laughter it restores the soul. The buffoonery, sacred buffoonery, making people laugh gets people ready to feel other kinds of emotions. It's like a jump start. So this is the part. So the first part is that one. It says they have one person wearing a soldier's belt, another wearing the boots, spear, and cloak, who's proclaimed as the huntsman. One person was dressed as a woman in a silk dress with gilded sandals and a curly wig, and walked in a mincing manner, he says. Yet another looked like a gladiator in helmet and greaves with shield and sword. There was a magistrate, it seems, with a purple toga and rods of office. And there was a philosopher with a goatee beard and a cloak with a staff and woven sandals. Here were a brace of long poles. There's a fisherman with line hooks. There was a tame bear dressed as a housewife, borne on a chair. There was an ape wearing a Phrygian straw hat and a saffron robe. There was an ass with wings glued to its shoulder, with a decrepit old man on its back, and claiming that it was Pegasus. I mean, people are just laughing. This is great. It's so fun. And so they're getting ready. And he says, behind the laughter-loving crowd pleasers, the procession proper was ready to take place. Okay, so we have the laughter. Now it's time to get serious, right? And so what happens now is that, in fact, he says, interestingly enough, he says, the procession proper was readying itself to celebrate the goddess who saves, goddess of salvation. And and of course, there were women in gleaming white. Women are wearing gleaming white, garlanded with flowers of spring, rejoicing in their various burdens. They had mirrors fastened to their backs to show their obedience to the goddess who would follow. They sprinkled the streets with pleasant balms and fragrances. After them, you have the light bearers, because she was the goddess of light. Now, I didn't mention this, I skipped this section earlier, but she's known as the goddess of the moonlight. So she reflects the light of the sun, but she's the great lunar goddess. Hence, that's why her crescent was on her forehead. But now they want to focus upon her still as this goddess of light. And so the next part of the procession after these ladies who are making everything smell really good, right? Everything's getting perfumed. So after the laughter, now you have the perfuming. After that, you have those who are bringing light. It says these are a throng of men and women carrying every means of shedding light, he says, such as torches, lamps, wax candles to honor the source of the celestial stars. Beautiful, right? Of course, as you know, Isis was connected to the stars. She was the goddess Satit, right? Which is connected to Sirius, the dog star, called Sothis by the Egyptians, right? By the way, Apuleius, who another writer, basically talks about the same thing. Into this playful masquerade of overflowing populace, the procession proper now marched its way. Women, gleaming in their white vestments, move with symbolic gestures of delight. Yeah, the same thing, the same kind of idea. Carrying combs of ivory, went through various caressive motions of combing and dressing the queenly tresses of their lady, or they sprinkled the street with drops of balm. So there you have it. But Paul was after this. So, okay, so you got the laughter, you got the perfuming, right? You got the light. What comes next? The musicians, of course. Yeah, the musicians with their pipes and flutes, they appear. In fact, it mentions also the temple pipers from the temple of Serapis were also there. This is what Apuleius says. By the way, Philocolus says the same thing. Next came the musicians, interweaving in sweetest measure the notes of pipe and flute, and then a supple choir of chosen youths, clad in snow, right? The snow white tunics came singing a delightful song, and then of course with a song that connects to the muses and so forth. And then meanwhile, there was mentioned by this source saying a number of officials kept calling out, "Make way for the goddess! Make way for the goddess!" So kind of like the security guards, right? So as this procession's going forth, there are people on the sides going, "Make way for the goddess! Make way for the goddess!" Making sure the crowds don't overdo it. After that, a mighty throng of men and women of every age and rank, and these are the initiates of the sacred mysteries, right? And they poured on behind, their linen robes shining radiantly, the women's hair in glossy coils under transparent veils. So their hair is in these glossy coils under these veils. The men's heads closely shaved and glistening, the earthly stars of the great rite. And so there you have it. So women have their hair in coils and under veils, and men look like me. I guess I look appropriate for the day, right? Do it up. All right. So now I got to say that the veil is very important to Isis, and so female followers were expected to, on holy days, to wear this veil. And of course, this idea connects to Isis herself, and basically says one inscription: "I am all that has been and is and shall be, and no mortal has ever lifted my mantle." You have also this idea is that she is virgin-like, virginal. In some cases, you have the idea that she's created the universe even without Osiris. Some versions of their beliefs. Just kind of depends, right? Okay, male members, of course, were expected to shave their heads because it was connected, according to Plutarch, connected to mourning. When you're mourning somebody, you shave your heads, and so you're removing your hair, in a sense, as an offering to Isis, and that you have renounced your previous life, and she has given you new life. That's the idea behind that. When it comes to the linen garments, I will say this, that you don't wear cotton because Isis doesn't believe in wearing anything that's connected to the animals at all. Against that. So linen was the way. But other than this ritual, typically the outfits were very colorful, uh, very, very beautiful, um, uh, and um, and multicolored. Okay. So anyway, moving right on. After that, you had uh, people are shaking the sistrum, and then of course, as time goes on, they start to bring the sacred emblems, right? But before that, you have a palm branches waving, right? And then you're going to have uh, towards the end a priest. The priests arrive, and towards the end, they carried an ancient image of the great goddess in the lap of the priest had this on the lap of his robe. And he says, not in the shape of any beast, wild or tame, or bird or human being, but inspiring reverence in its skill, working by its very strangeness, being the ineffable symbol somehow of deeper sacredness, to be cloaked in awful silence. Formed as it was of gleaming gold after this manner, it took the form of a little hollow urn, its surface engraved with Egyptian hieroglyphics, with a rounded base and extended spout opened slightly like a beak, and a broad curving handle at the opposite side extended backwards deeply, from which an asp, coiled in a knot, reared its scaly, swollen neck on high. So now we have that which is seen, that's shown, the sacred emblem. This is part of the mysteries. We don't know fully what this means, and we're not supposed to know because this is all shrouded in mysterium, right? And now, amongst these priests arrives that priest. That's right. So that priest sees Apuleius, sees Lucius, excuse me. Oh, maybe Apuleius too. Sees Lucius as the ass, and uh, and so what he does is he stretches out his hand and held the rose garland level with my lips, and nor did the goddess' divine promise fail, for on the instant my ugly bestial form slipped from me, and all of a sudden he is now human again. And he wanted to say something now that his mouth is operational. But quickly, the priest uh, grabbed a robe of linen to cover him because he's naked. Because he was an ass before. Now he's just showing his ass. So his assets. I don't know. So there you have it. So a quick cover, and now he's covered. Now what will happen here is something interesting, a little bit more that a lot of people will kind of uh, skip, and that is that through this initiation process, right after this, as he's made his promise, he is a worshiper of Isis. He's not going back on this one. It's not happening. But what happens is that uh, Isis makes it clear to him as follows, right? As well as the others. Uh, and of course, speaking through the priest, right? The priest says to Lucius through Isis' inspiration that when it comes to fate, that blind fortune, while tormenting you with imminent danger, has brought you from the throes of evil chance to blessed happiness. Let her vent her rage and fury now on some other object of her cruelty to me. Um, for hostile fate finds no opening against those whose lives our royal goddess renders free to serve her. How could those bandits, wild beasts, servitude, the windings of savage journeys that end where they began, the fear of death renewed each day, how could all they serve fortune's evil turn? For now you are under the wings of an all-seeing providence, who with the splendor of her light illuminates all the gods. Wear a happier face to match the white robe you now wear, and join the procession of the saving goddess with joyful and conquering step. Let the unbelieving bear witness and understand their errant ways. Behold Lucius, freed from his former troubles, delighting in the favor of her mighty Isis, triumphing over fate. So now fate There's again mystery cults. You've now defeated fate. Who's in charge? Well, the wheel of fate has been broken. The goddess is now in charge. He says, now dedicate yourself to the commands of our sect. Accept the burden of your own free will. So, but still, so you have to, so it's a personal decision that you make in complete freedom, and from which, of course, fate is broken. So he joins the procession, and then following that, uh, they get to the sea there, and there's a finely crafted ship decorated with marvelous Egyptian hieroglyphics. Take in a lighted torch, an egg, and some sulfur. The priest uttered solemn prayers with reverent lips and purified the ship thoroughly, dedicating it and naming it for the goddess. The shining sail of this happy vessel bore an inscription, its letters woven in gold, the text of a prayer for a prosperous sailing throughout the new season. Right. There's also a gold leaf glittered from the stern, which was shaped like Isis's sacred goose was there. And so the ship, loaded with wealth and with prayers, was sent off, and then they all returned back to the temple. Of course, according to the belief, the Egyptians believe that the Isis temple itself is infused with magical powers. I mean, we even found a London medical papyrus from the 18th dynasty that showed a formula for empowering the walls of these Egyptian temples. It goes, the earth was in darkness, but the moon shone on this papyrus scroll on every side. Yeah. Now, daily rituals, we do know a little bit about them, right? Basically, what happens is there's a representative. First was a pharaoh, and then, of course, there had to be somebody else, like a stand-in. And that stand-in later on is known as a first prophet, right? Under him was a deputy, and under them were those who were known as the servant of the goddess, and they were also connected to prophecy. And then there was after that those known as the weebs. What a weeb, right? You want to be a weeb. They're the pure ones, right? And they are the ordinary or common priests. And they're organized in 4 shifts, with each shift serving an entire month before standing down for 3 months to return again on the 4th month again. During this period of time, they were expected to be completely devoted day and night for the rituals reserved for Isis. All the priests were paid. Yeah, you get paid. Isn't that great? With the revenue drawn from set percentages of the offerings to the temple, as well as other sources of income. Yet they were not tax exempt. No, so they had to pay taxes from that. And of course, typically a day at the temple was basically at the break of dawn. There's a procession that went to the temple, the high priest in attendance. The high priest was brought, or the prophet was brought to a special room in each temple called the House of Mourning, and which point he purified himself in Natron. Then the high priest entered the temple, ignited the temple fire, and then charged the censer with charcoal and incense. And then, following the fire ritual, the inner shrine containing Isis was approached. Its doors still shut for the day before. And then there's hymns being sung before her, and then as well as other offerings given. And then, of course, more incense offered to the image of Isis. And then after the day is over, they would kind of, close up shop, sweep backwards, and after closing the sacred door. And that was pretty much it. This happened every day. Oh, and they would also dress up the image of Isis, and then at the end of the day, they would keep it dressed. The next day, they get rid of the outfit, and it'd be a new dress. So every day, Isis wore something new. Okay. Well, so meanwhile, all right, we covered temple worship. We're actually covering quite a bit, so I'm happy about that. Um, uh, so now, I want to say that Then he goes back, uh, and um, and he's filled with joy. The people bearing green twigs, sacred branches, and garlands they had gathered kissed the feet of the goddess, whose statue made of silver stood on the temple steps before scattering to their homes. And I gazed intently on the image of the goddess. Meanwhile, their rumor started to spread that he was brought back and to life. His family thought that he was gone. And you know what? It's kind of a sweet moment. But his family, his friends and blood relatives ceased mourning, and they came to greet him. They're so happy that he's alive after all, right? And then, of course, he took a room in the sacred temple itself. But he did have this need or feeling that he wants to be initiated, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to commit to abstinence, you know? And he wants to maybe sow his wild oats. As time goes on, he starts to succumb to the diet, very strict diet. Basically, you get no fish, no mutton, no pork, no onions. You can't eat cow meat, right? You can, of course, there you have it. So he starts to start the diet, but he then decides, okay, I really want to be initiated. And he tells the temple priest that, but the temple priest says, no, you got to have a dream that enables for that to happen. ISIS will have to come in some kind of dream, or there needs to be some kind of sign for the initiation to take place. And so he mentions, kind of interesting, he said the bright white sanctuary curtains were drawn, and we prayed to the august face of the goddess as a priest made his ritual rounds of the temple altars, praying and sprinkling water and libations from a chalice filled with a spring within the walls. And finally, the dream happens, and so now he does want initiation. And then we get this interesting line. I'm glad we still have time to mention this. Is that the sign of the goddess happens, and it says as follows: none of his order had been so wrong-minded, so determined on their own instruction, as to dare to take office rashly, or without the goddess's direct command, and thereby to commit a deadly sin. But it goes on: the gates of the underworld and the guardianship of life are both in her hands, he said, the priest said, and the rites of initiation are akin to a willing death and salvation through her grace. Unquote. Indeed, continue, those whose term of life was drawing to a close, who already stood on the last threshold of light, if the sect's unspoken mysteries could be safely entrusted to them, were often summoned by the power of the goddess to be in a manner reborn through her grace and set again on a path of renewed life. Whoa! So this sounds kind of close to Christianity in many ways. Do you see this? How mystery religions really do connect in many ways to these kinds of ideas, right? And of course, but he realizes that he has to take the leap, right? So what happens is the purification. He goes through a ritual bath. He's purified, and then after that, he has to have a fast, and obviously no drinking wine. And then, of course, he's led into the sanctuary, into the innermost recess. And now we have the mystery. And yet, what I find is fascinating is that he's not going to reveal the mystery. Full-on salvic initiation ritual. I want to read this. He talks about it, but talks around it. He says, and now, diligent reader, you are no doubt keen to know what was said next and what was done. I tell you, if to tell you were allowed. If you were allowed to hear, then you might know. But ears and tongue would sin equally, the latter for its profane indiscretion, the former for their unbridled curiosity. Oh, I shall speak, such a desire to hear may be a matter of deep religious longing, and I would not torment you with further anguish. But I shall speak only of what can be revealed to the minds of the uninitiated without need for subsequent atonement, things which, though you have heard them, you may not well understand. So it's kind of a parable, right? It's a mystery. He's all, so listen and believe in what is true. I reach the very gates of death, and treading Proserpine's threshold, yet passed through all the elements. So he went. So he went down the very gates of death, went to Proserpine's threshold, yet passed through all the elements and returned. I have seen the sun at midnight shining brightly. I have entered the presence of the gods below and the presence of the gods above, and I have paid due reverence before them. So we have this initiation. He dies, he dies to himself, and he goes to the underworld, and he's brought back to life. So he dies, and now he is fully initiated into the cult of Isis, right? Concerning her mysteries, Plutarch, another writer, states that Isis discloses the divine mysteries to those who truly and justly have the name of bearers of the sacred vessels and wearers of the sacred robes. And so he emerged, Lucius emerged, wearing 12 robes as a sign of consecration. 12 robes, the sacred dress, right? Well, what is this? Well, some people think since he was doing this at night, these are the 6 hours of the night as he descends and as he ascends, and these robes represent that aspect. And of course, I held a burning torch in my right hand, and my head was gracefully garlanded with a wreath of gleaming palm leaves projecting outward like rays of light. And then, of course, he stays there for a while in total and complete joy, praying right before the statue, image of Isis, holding on to her feet, not wanting to leave at all, the enjoying the ineffable pleasure of gazing on the goddess's sacred image, bound to her by an act of beneficence I could never repay, and he's joyful. What happens then? Well, he goes off to Rome, and in Rome, Isis reveals to him that he should be initiated into the rites of Serapis, because the two go together. And then he gets initiated again into another mystery of Isis that is in Rome. And then it mentions the fact at that point, after this third initiation, he shaves his head and he shows it to all. And he is successful in his life after that. And he is happy. And of course, the credits roll. And now I believe you have a real good understanding of the cult of Isis from the context of the Roman period. Thank you. There you go. There we go. Any questions? A lot of details, right?
Just a few. Were there any like sources of home worship in the cult of Isis, or no?
Is any what? I'm sorry, what?
Were there any sources of home worship for individuals in the cult of Isis in antiquity, or no?
Yes. Oh yeah. People, because we find a lot on personal religion in connection to Isis. So it's not all public, but it is when it comes to the initiations. The initiations are public, but your veneration, you have this. I'll just tell you places. So at Ephesus, for example, we find images of Isis in the household areas. They were connected to the household niche, a place where people would venerate the various gods, goddesses. They had a sacred place within their homes, much like you see today within the new households, right? Or Catholic household, right? You have your altar. Well, the home altar was very, was part of a personal religion, and the image of Isis is there, and sometimes Osiris. I have an image of Osiris. I showed it to you guys one time, a real one. So yes, they did actually have these, and the archaeological evidence proves that there are uh, fragments of references to worshiping these in your home. But we've got to remember the nature of life is really public. So, so even though we have this idea of the duality between public and private, and the reality is that think of many countries. You live in a village and everybody knows what's going on. That's a good way of looking at it. You can't keep a secret in your belief system or your perspectives, your ideals. So there's this collective mentality. So even if you have your own personal religion, it automatically by default becomes public. Is that making sense? Except that's what makes Christianity so strange, is like people would meet privately and secretly in these places. But there's secrets within the ISIS belief system, and there is absolutely when it comes to the big mysteries. Um, what you heard, though, lots of it is very public. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Would you be able to direct to like sources I could read more on this topic or no?
Not right off the top of my head because there's not much there. But there are anthologies of personal religion. Have them back there, but I would have to leave the screen. That give excerpts from primary sources on private practices as opposed to public ones. But there's still a problem when it comes to that the private public modern sensibility to that those ideas. If you're from certain places of the world, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I spent some time in these places too, where like in Turkey, for example, and everything just kind of runs together. You don't really have private life in some of those villages are like doesn't exist, and that's the way it was in ancient times in many cases. Yeah.
Was Cybele the absolute worst mystery cult ever?
The Kibble cult.
Cybele,
Yeah,
the little clippies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That wasn't a very good. I mean, well, I shouldn't say it was a very good one. It depended on who followed it and how they followed it. There are various degrees of the Kibble cult, and it really depended upon, if it was the Pisidius one that was brought to Rome. Those people that followed that in a direct sense were very few, but there are those people who are initiates, excuse me, who are how do I say this? They're initiates, but they're not fully part of living in the temple, and they didn't do any of these strange practices except for the Tarabolium was pretty popular, and 7 years after bathed in blood, it was renewed. But yeah, you had those individuals where, for the men, they get into this ecstatic state, and you have the music playing, and they go faster and faster and faster, and they start cutting themselves with knives, and they cut various places of their male member, and then they draw other people into that crowd, and they cut their male member as well, and they end up becoming eunuchs, and they become female, and live in the temple. And yeah, so there's that aspect of that's what you're thinking about, right? That one. Yeah.
Yes, I saw, and they've recovered one of the little tools, the castrating tools, and I'm like, I don't think I think I'd rather be a Roman priest than do that.
Well, yep. Now the Isis one, you have degrees of people who follow. You have those who are the inner sanctum, ones that are follow the dietary rules to a T, abstinence. They are the priests proper. And we saw that procession, examples of the kinds of degrees. So you have the everyday Isis worshiper who are going to eat fish, and they'll eat some meat, and they'll eat, and they won't practice all the observances. But the case of Lucius, he is going in deep. He's going to be part of the inner sanctum, so to speak. So it's going to be a little more tough on him. Having said that, a lot of people believe that the cult of Isis was very rewarding as a mystery cult in Roman times. So it was known that, as you heard, it was known to bring people much joy and happiness and celebration and laughter, and so the celebratory aspect of this makes it pretty compelling, to those in the ancient world. So, yeah, Mithras worship, of course, just for soldiers, pretty much. Anybody else?
Dorian asked in the chat if you can recommend some more reading on the ancient weebs.
Ancient weeds?
Weebs.
Oh, the weebs. Oh, yeah. I got that from a journal article, actually. So I don't have the source on here, but I can get you that later. Yeah. Store. Yeah. Yeah, that was good. Yeah, the weebs. Yeah. Like I said, I should have had all my sources on me here, but they're there. So, anybody else?
I have a question. What did ISIS have against cotton? I didn't catch that.
Okay, so it's a very strange. I'm glad you asked this question because I didn't have time to go through it. Now I do. Actually, I'm sorry. I meant to say I meant to say not cotton. I meant to say, it was my mistake. I meant to say wool. So that was a mistake. So the idea of wool, and my brain said cotton, but no, linen's fine, but they don't want any wool. They don't want anything. And I said later on animal products. I'm thinking, did I say wool or did I say cotton? But yeah. So the idea is they don't want any animal products on your body. So anything that's animal products is considered unclean. But the other things they talk about is that why would you take on? There's actually some writing talking about this. Plutarch talks about this too. Like, why would you take on wearing animal fur? Why would you do that to warm yourself? I mean, why would you take? That's their body. You're taking their warmth away for yourself. Does that make sense? So if they think that's kind of messed up, I can see that. Yeah. So I guess they'd be against mint coats, right? Yeah, wearing furs. No, don't do it. So they're anti-fur, apparently. Form of deferment. Anybody else?
I had one other question, if you don't mind.
Okay.
In the Grace translation, at least, he says like when Osiris comes to him, he says, I saw him in his true form, on the second night.
Yeah.
And it seems that when in the ancient Greek myths, at least, if you saw a god or goddess in their true form, there was always some horrible price to pay for that. So is this like a difference of the era, or does this have to do with the mystery religions that
has to do with the mystery religion? Because he sees also Isis in many cases. He believes in her true form too. So, and he's like, I'm gonna go ahead and describe her. This is what she looks like. So I'll go there. So what happens is this: the complexities of Middle Platonism. You have the true invisible gods that are beyond all. They're immortals. They distance themselves from men and women, and they don't mingle with us. And then you have their emanations that go into the material world. Okay, Those emanations that go into the material world go into the realm of the daemons. Daemons, of course, we talked about earlier in the talk, where we go into the idea of that these are messengers. These are the ones that communicate with us. And so what will happen is they are able to connect with the material world. They're able to talk to us as from the invisible gods beyond, as it emanates, like the rays of the sun. It emanates, and as it goes further down, it becomes less and less light. So in many cases, what you're seeing here is the true form of these, as is understood in the realm of the material context, right? But the symbolism is still there, that Serapis or Osiris is really connected to the sun-like aspect. And then, of course, Isis is connected to the moon-like aspect and reflecting, his light. But that Osiris himself, beyond that, there's the unknowable God or the monad. And so it moves through. So what you may be seeing is that Osiris and Isis, as manifested within the material world, that through that mixture between spirit and matter a little bit, so it forms an image. Does that make sense? But still, they would be like, if you really would completely see Osiris or Isis, you would not live. Or something bad will happen to you. But you could still see the essence of the light. And let's keep going here. The essence of the light. Well, I don't understand what that means. Oh, here it is. What's used Christianese for this? You have Peter, James, and John. They're at the Mount of Transfigurations, and they look up, and Jesus is there, and they see the radiance of God the Father. They don't see God, because no one has seen God at any time, right? But they see the radiance. That is the uncreated light of God, and they're able to see it with their own eyes. So while you cannot see the Father of God, you can see his radiance and participate in that radiance. That idea is also found in Greco-Roman religions and also found in Greco-Roman philosophy, and it feeds into this idea that we can see the radiance. And what is Lucius talking about as the ass, right? He sees the radiance of Isis, that she truly is behind it all. She is the stars. She is the moon. She is the light. So this is where you have her image is connected to the concept of she is. They're showing lights, right? Various torches or other ways of demonstrating that she is this source of light that we can see, but that transcends from material to spiritual. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. So there it is. Easy as that. Any other questions? You guys got it? No other questions? Do you feel like you understand mystery religions a little bit more? Going into it slowly but surely? Yeah.
Jamie is asking in the chat about other mystery cults to other gods and goddesses.
Okay. Well, there's quite a few. I wrote a book on one. It's like almost 400 pages of. That's a big topic.
It was a common thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Very common. Oh yeah. This is very common for mystery cults dedicated to various goddesses. In fact, included in that, remember Lucius as the ass mentions all these goddesses, and then the response arrives from Isis, and she specifically mentions certain goddesses within the context of the cities that they're worshipped at and who worship them, these goddesses. So yeah, it's a long list, of specifics. Aphrodite is her worship is very big at Paphos, right, on Cyprus. And of course, obviously Athena and in Athens, and Aphrodite is pretty popular. There's at Lagina, they worship Hecate. Hecate worship was common. We find lots of images of her. There'll be another talk coming up. But people, part of personal religion. We keep finding these little artifacts all over the place within domestic contexts. That means that people have these images in their homes, and in many cases, they are worshiping these or dedicated to them. Yeah. Any other questions?
Stacy's asking about the importance of Isis's veil.
Oh, good. I skipped this whole section of the veil. I thought I'll never get to it. But now we have a revelation. So I'll go ahead and see what I got here. Strict diet. Now I gotta find it. I got the weebs. Maybe I won't be able to find it. It's a long talk. Yeah. All right, so I'm not seeing it here. The veil, basically, her head is veiled because she is the one who. Wait, I have it here. I'd like to give you the sources as opposed to just going through here. I kind of wrote down the word veil. Freedom, transformation, free will. This talk is 40 pages long. Can you believe it? Got it. If I did find a veil, I think it right here. Yeah, let's see. Okay, here it is. Okay. Veil. I
can edit all this out.
I figure I might as well get it. Here it is. Okay, so basically, female followers were expected to, on holy days, as I said before, to have their hair in glossy coils and to be wearing veils. Isis herself is associated with the veil, with the first mention of the veil of Isis appearing in Plutarch's work. I'm giving you sources. Of mentioning a seated statue of a goddess in the Egyptian city of Sais that bore the inscription, "I am all that has been and is and shall be, and no mortal has ever lifted my mantle." Plutarch identified the goddess as Athena, whom the Egyptians considered to be Isis. So there's a connection there with Athena, who is this, has virginal aspects, right? That within the Greek context is being connected with Isis. And then, of course, you're going to get the veil that goes along with it because Athena is oftentimes connected to a veil. Sais was a cult center of the goddess Neith, whom the Greeks compared to their goddess Athena, and thus the goddess that Plutarch spoke of. In Plutarch's time, Isis was the preeminent goddess in the Egyptian religion. It was synchronized with Neith, which is why Plutarch equated the two. More than 300 years after Plutarch, the Neoplatonist Proclus wrote of the same statue in book 1 of his commentaries on Plato's Timaeus. In this version, no mortal is replaced by no one, and a third statement is added, "The fruit of my womb was the son." Proclus said the statue was in the temple of Sais, but the inner areas of Egyptian temples were not accessible to anyone but priests, and it is unlikely that a statue of a deity would have been permanently veiled. Priests saw the cult image of the god every day when performing the temple rites. However, a statue in a temple's courtyard or halls could have borne an inscription similar to the one that Plutarch and Proclus related to. The first part of the inscription, again going, "I am all that has been and it shall be," means the goddess encompasses everything. This claim was commonly made of creator gods such as Ra, or Ammon in the Egyptian religion. If the same was said about Isis, it reflected her increased status in Greco-Roman times, in which she was often said to be the creator of the world. The second part, no one has ever lifted my mantle, implies that the goddess was virginal, a claim that was occasionally made of Isis in Greco-Roman times, but conflicted with the long-standing belief that she and her husband Osiris conceived their son Horus. Proclus' version suggests that the goddess conceived and gave birth to the son without the participation of the male deity, which would reflect Egyptian myths about Neith as the mother of the sun god Ra. So the Neith aspect will just kind of mix in together. Another possible explanation suggests that in the latter part of the Egyptian inscription, there is nobody except me, proclaims that all-encompassing goddess was unique. But anyway, and then of course it goes into one more thing, and that is several other sources influenced the motive of the veiled Isis. One was the tradition that linked Isis with nature and the goddess Artemis. Well, more a little bit. The Ephesian Artemis was depicted with round protuberances on her chest that may originally have been jewelry, but came to be interpreted as breasts. Isis was sometimes compared with Artemis, and the Roman writer Corbius in the 4th century wrote, Isis is the earth or nature that is under the sun. That is why the goddess's entire body bristles with a multitude of breasts placed close to one another, as in the case of Artemis of the Ephesus, because all things are nourished by earth and by nature. And so she, in a sense, is of this power. She has this glorification, and so we are profane. And there's more that goes on talking about because we are profane and we are not fit to see the light, the full light of Isis, then Isis needs to be covered, needs to be mantled, right, so that her full radiance is covered, and so the eyes of the profane do not see. Is that a full answer? I told you. Yeah. So usually when I do the lectures, I just skim over everything I write. This is what I write. What I skim. So yeah. So good academic stuff, but who wants to hear that, right? But there's your complete answer.
Okay, Stacy is also asking, did women serve as priestesses in her cult?
Yes. As demonstrated, even in the procession, there were priestesses in that procession. So they were there, yes, and they're depicted even at Pompeii too, right? So you have priestesses depicted there in the art. Yeah, so we have images. Remember, the priestesses again will, like the followers, will have the coiled ringlets and of course the veils over their heads. But it also depends on where you're at. This particular one was in Corinth. Had it been in Alexandria, you'd have more priestesses. Were they virgin priestesses? Yeah. But they were also, the men were virgins too, so everyone gets to be virgins. Now, having said that, there's always exceptions. So we find inscriptions of sometimes of those who are connected to the priesthood having husbands. So there's always exceptions. In fact, with Artemis of the Ephesians, we have tons of priestesses, and they're supposed to be virgins. And I have documented in my book, they're mentioning their husband. I'm like, well, they're virgins now, and then they have their kid. Their kid becomes a priestess. So, hey, what happens in Ephesus stays in Ephesus. I don't know. But so does that make sense? So there's always exceptions to every rule. And it does depend on your particular locality, your city, your town, the local culture. Yeah. Yeah, well, you do have different understandings of, but in the golden ass, it actually it makes it very clear abstinence, and it makes it very clear he has to be celibate. So now this is, of course, the work was in Greek originally. It was translated to Latin. So I mean, there could be a translation situation, but this source kind of does double duty of the fact that Lucius has got to give up his wild oats, and boy, he has wild oats. Stories there I could not tell you. There's one that's so bad that I'll tell you right now because nobody's gonna be listening this long into the talk. Basically, he becomes part of a circus act, and this rich noblewoman sees his ass, is the ass, and pays money to have intimacy with him, and he enjoys it. And there's he does all these other kind of sexual exploits as an ass, and so that's why he's doing the soon after is when he's throwing himself into the water 7 times. So you can understand that because it turned out that she was not a good person. She tried to kill her husband. These things happen. Yeah, she was married. So there you have it. Makes you want to read the book. But so in that case, in his context, he has to be. He's upset about it. There's a section I have in here where I don't know if I want to join because I don't want to give it up. I don't want to give up sex. And so he's actually talks about it. The fact he doesn't want to. He's like, it's pretty harsh. He has to give it up, but he finally does. And the other, now that's interesting. I want to bring this up too, is that makes it very clear for a fact the men who are priests, no sex for them, who are all the way up, the higher ones. But remember, there are levels. Remember, I told you there's levels of priesthood. So it depends on what level you're a part of. If you're a lower level one, you get married and don't worry about that. But it's if you're the higher, so there's a ranking system that you go by. Does that help? And the other part is, it looks like men, it was very more restrictive of men than women. For the one out there, no more sowing wild oats. It's over. Anybody else, or except same person? Any other questions? Okay, so I love this question. This is a good one. Did the followers of the mystery cults venerate the entire pantheon or just focus on one? It's whatever worked. So we find tombstones in inscriptions with all the initiations of all these different mystery religions that they're a part of. So it's like, I'm an initiative of this belief system, initiative of that one, initiative of that one. So some people didn't just stay with one mystery religion. They just really wanted to make sure that, hey, at the I want to have fire insurance, and I want to go to a happy place, and that means I'm going to join a whole bunch of them. So be it. And so we actually see their initiates and many, and then we also realize that other family altars, they have quite a few just to make sure. In fact, an emperor by the name of Severus Alexander. You can look this up, Severus Alexander. He had an altar that had multiple gods on it that he worshipped. And he threw on there, I think there was an image of Jesus and Abraham on there, just for good measure. It's like, sure, I'll try the Christian one too. So he mixed it with Hercules and these others. And so so they were kind of collective in that sense. Does that help? So did you have to be loyal to just one? No, but you do get a feeling that those who are further up the priesthood are, right? So if you're a layman or you're a servant of the temple, but you're not all the way up, then you probably have a multitude of various gods and goddesses on your altar at home. But the further up you go, the more serious. When you read the Golden Ass or the Metamorphosis, you get this feeling that the character is just he's sold out. So many funny. I did a correlation with this one time. It does make a lot of sense. If you guys are familiar with the Hare Krishna movement. I see a lot of connection between the Hare Krishna and the Isis worship. Think about it. Think about it. Okay, the same forbidden foods. Okay, that's good. When it comes to marriage, when it comes to relations, only for procreation, they have that too. You had the idea of celebration and dancing with different kinds of percussion and singing and jumping and joy and exuberance. This is making sense. You have a lot of that. You have you have the shaved head, right, for the men, right? You have the veils for the women. Wow, this is getting pretty scary. I just keep going on there. That list gets longer and longer. Is this making sense? So, but remember, the Hare Krishna does come out of Hinduism, but much of Hinduism is connected to ancient religion. An ancient religion which all these ideas participate in. I can think of even more is coming on there on my head, but I'm popping up. I hope answer the question. Any other questions? Yeah, we cover it all. Did I review much? Yeah, you're welcome. Did I reveal too much of the veil? Lifting the veil. You're seeing it. Too much, and again, the other part is that to go into Laurel's question, is that remember at the end of the procession you have this image, this of that's beyond our comprehension of Isis that we don't understand. So it's the idea of the ineffable. Ultimately, in a spiritual sense, she is beyond representation, but is able to represent herself as different goddesses in different images. But ultimately, she's Isis from this perspective. But she's showing herself in radiance as she emanates from beyond into the material realm through this intermediary area that is as a realm of the daemons or the messengers, and she's able to shine forth and touch us. But ultimately, she's a mystery, and she's beyond our comprehension. And she encompasses all the goddesses. She's the face of the divine feminine. Yeah, right. Right. Did you guys have fun? Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Bad 80s comedy. Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea where they start the processions with a laugh. I think that's great. I think that's healthy. It gets, yeah. Thank you so much, Jessica, for being here. I think it really gets people in a good mood. And maybe they'll be more apt to move aside when they say, move for the goddess. They're in a good mood as it is. And as opposed to just saying, the coming and they're pushing people through. Get people laughing. Yeah. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, I will be closing up. It was wonderful seeing you.